There is pain that we carry in silence for years, until one day courage speaks louder than fear. This is the story I never thought I would have the strength to tell. My name is Maria Oliveira. Today I am 86 years old, but this story happened when I was only 27. I was born in a small town in the interior of Minas Gerais, where everyone knew each other and appearances mattered more than the truth. Before continuing, tell me where you are watching this report from. Take advantage and subscribe to the channel and like the video. This makes me very happy. I grew up learning that women should be modest, obedient and, above all, guardians of the home. I married Jose Oliveira at the age of 19, the son of the owner of the city's pharmacy, a man everyone respected. At the time I thought I had been blessed. He was handsome, hardworking, and gave me a better life than the one I had on the farm with my parents. Our daughter Janine was born 2 years later. A girl with big, dark eyes like mine and curly hair that framed a face that was always smiling. Since she was little, she was smart and talkative, fascinated by stories and the radio in the living room. She danced when Roberto Carlos and Vanderlea's songs played, and I used to say that she had music in her veins. Jose didn't like all this commotion very much. He said that girls should be more reserved, quieter. But I defended our daughter as best I could, always being careful not to upset him too much. We lived in a simple but well-kept house on the main street of the city. Jose worked at the city hall, was responsible for accounting, and everyone saw him as an honest and dedicated man. I took care of the house and did some embroidery on request to supplement my income. It was a simple, more stable life. At least that's what it looked like from the outside. It was in 1964, when Jan and I was 8 years old, that I started to note the changes. At first they were small things, so subtle that I almost didn't notice them. She, who always ran to the window when she heard her father's car arriving, began to stay quiet, as if she didn't want to be noticed. On nights when Jose arrived home from work later, she went to bed earlier, even though she wasn't sleepy. I remember well the day I realized something was really wrong. It was a Saturday afternoon. We were in the kitchen making tapioca cookies, something Janine always loved. She was helping to roll the dough when we heard the sound of Jose's car arriving. In an instant he saw panic in her eyes. Her little hands began to tremble and she dropped the bowl she was holding. When the glass shattered on the floor, she began to cry desperately. Not because of the fright, but because of a fear that I didn't understand. "Sorry, Mom. Sorry. Dad will be mad at me." She sobbed as she tried to pick up the pieces with shaking hands. I gently pulled her away, telling her it was okay, that accidents happen, but she wouldn't stop crying. When Jose entered the kitchen and saw the scene, he simply looked at Janine with those cold eyes that I already knew well and said, "Go to your room, Jan. Your mother will clean up this mess." She obeyed immediately, head down, without saying a word. That was not my happy and lively little girl. Something was very wrong. In the following weeks, I became more attentive. Janine had changed her habits. She, who had always loved colorful dresses, now only wanted to wear loose, dark clothes. She stopped singing while playing. At school, the teacher called me in to talk, worried because Dianine, who had always been participative, now barely spoke in class and had difficulty concentrating. At night, I began to notice that she had frequent nightmares. She would wake up screaming, sweaty, but when I went to her room and asked her what she had dreamed, she said she didn't remember. Some mornings I would find the sheets wet. She had started wetting the bed again, something that hadn't happened since she was 4 years old. Jose's behavior also bothered me. Intrigued. He, who had always been distant and unaffectionate with his daughter, now seemed to have a sudden interest in putting her to bed. "You already work too much, Maria. Let me take care of this," he would say. At first I thought it was a sign that he was trying to be a better father, but whenever he went to Janine's room, she became even quieter the next day. One afternoon, while I was washing clothes in the back sink, I heard Janine talking to her rag doll, Lily, which I had made for her. I approached quietly and what I heard froze my blood. "Don't tell anyone, Lily. Daddy said it's our secret. He said that Mommy will be very sad to find out and that no one will believe me because he is important in the city." I froze, my hands wet and shaking, feeling my heart beating so hard it felt like it was going to explode. I didn't want to believe what my mind was beginning to suspect. Jose, my husband, the father of my daughter. No, it couldn't be. Respectable people like they didn't do that kind of thing. It must have been some mistake, some childish confusion. But the pieces were starting to fit together. The sudden fear, the change in behavior, the nightmares, the way she would flinch when he came near. And then there were the physical signs I had ignored, the bruises that sometimes appeared on her arms and that Jose explained by saying she had fallen while playing, the scratches on her back that she said she didn't remember how she got. That night I couldn't sleep. I lay next to Jose, feeling disgusted and afraid, questioning everything I believed about my marriage, about the man I shared my life with. The next morning I made a decision. I had to be sure. I started to observe more closely, to ask Janine indirect questions, to pay attention to every detail. Once I accidentally walked into her room when Jose was there, with the excuse of bringing clean clothes. The look he gave me was one of pure anger, something that made me even more alert. I asked my neighbor, Dona Consico, to keep an eye on our house when I went out to do some shopping. She told me that on one of those occasions she saw Jose come home early from work, when Janine was alone. I thought it was strange, Maria, because he never comes home from work at that time, she said. In June 1964, on a Friday I will never forget, it was raining heavily and the sky was dark, even though it was only 3 o'clock in the afternoon. I had told Jose that I was going to visit my sick sister in the neighboring city and would only return the next day. He didn't even hide his relief. I took the bus, but got off at the next stop and walked back along the back path that went around the neighborhood. The rain soaked my dress and hair, but I barely felt the cold. There was something more important. I entered silently through the back door, the one that creaked, but which I had secretly lubricated days before. The house was silent, except for the muffled sound coming from Janini's room. My heart was beating so hard I wondered if it could be heard. I walked down the hallway, my feet bare so as not to make noise, my breath held in my chest. Janine's bedroom door was ajar. I could hear Joseph's voice, low and threatening. You know this is our secret, don't you? Mom would be very sad if that happened. Maybe I would even leave and leave you alone with me. It was at that moment, standing in that dark hallway, wet from the rain and shaking, not from the cold, but from a fear and fury I had never felt before, that I understood that I needed to protect my daughter at any cost. What I did next would change our lives forever. But at that moment I could only think of one thing, saving Janini. Standing in that dark hallway, with the rain still running down my hair and soaking the wooden floor, I felt something inside me break and yet grow stronger at the same time. Warmth surged through my body, dispelling the chill of the rain, as my hands clenched into fists so tight my nails cut into my palms. I pushed the door with a strength I didn't know I had. The creak of the hinge seemed to echo throughout the house. The scene I encountered is etched in my memory like a photograph that never turns yellow. Jose sat on the edge of Janine's bed, his large hand on her leg, my daughter huddled against the headboard, her eyes wide with terror, her face streaked with silent tears. For a moment, we were all paralyzed. Jose was the first to react, jumping to his feet, his face transforming from that expression of power over a child in defense to the rage of a man discovered. Maria, what the hell are you doing here? Weren't you going to your sister's house? His voice tried to sound indignant, but there was a tremor of fear in it. I didn't answer him. My eyes were fixed on Janini's, who was looking at me with a mixture of shame, relief, and pleading. Mother, she whispered, her voice as fragile as a silk thread. That was enough. I crossed the room in 3 steps and placed myself between her and Jose. Get out of here, I ordered him. My voice unrecognizable even to myself. Get out of my daughter's room now. Are you crazy, woman? I am her father. I have a right to be here. Father. The word came out of me like poison. A father protects, a father loves. A father doesn't do what you are doing. I saw the fear in his eyes, not mine. But from what I knew was when he changed tactics. His face took on that superior expression he used when he wanted to belittle me. Are you hysterical, Maria? You don't know what you're saying. Go calm down. Take a sedative. You're scaring the girl with this madness. I realized in that moment all the times he had manipulated me, making me doubt myself. But this time it was different. There was a child, my daughter, who needed protection. Janine, I said without taking my eyes off Jose. Take your doll Lily and go to Dona Consico's room. Tell her your mom asked you to stay there for a while. She's not going anywhere. Joseph moved forward, but I stood firmly in the way. He is going, yes. And you will never touch her again. Janine slid off the bed and picked up her rag doll, her eyes wide with fear. Jose made a move to stop her, but I pushed him away with a strength I didn't know I had. He staggered back in surprise, and that gave Janine enough time to escape down the hallway. I heard the front door slam and knew she was safe, at least for now. It was then that Jose's fury turned completely towards me. "You'll regret this, Maria. No one will believe you. I am respected in this city. You are nothing." It was as if a veil was torn before my eyes. I saw clearly for the first time who the man I had married really was. He was not the respectable husband, the exemplary City Hall employee. He was a monster hiding behind a facade of respectability. "You might not believe me," he said with a calmness that surprised me. "But I will make them discover the truth." His face contorted into an expression I had never seen before. He stepped forward and grabbed me by the arms, his fingers digging into my flesh like claws. "You won't say anything. Did you understand?" "Nothing. Who's going to take a housewife's word against mine? I know everyone in this town. The mayor, the police chief, the priest, they all respect me. You are just a woman." As he spat out those words, something changed inside me. The fear I had always felt towards him began to dissipate, replaced by a fierce determination. It wasn't just for me anymore, it was for Jan and I. "You can hurt me, Jose, you can try to silence me, but I will not allow you to destroy our daughter." He laughed, a cold, humorless sound. "Our daughter, you don't even know if she's mine. Who knows what you were doing while I was working?" It was so absurd, so clearly a desperate attempt to hurt me, that I almost laughed. Instead, I looked into her eyes and said, "Janine is my daughter, and I will protect her from you at all costs." What happened next is etched into my memory in hazy flashes. Joseph, realizing that his threats were not working, lost control. His fists came up and I felt the first blow land on my face. The pain was explosive, followed by the metallic taste of blood. I fell against Janine's dressing table, knocking over the few objects that were there. A hairbrush, a small mirror, and a pair of scissors that I used to cut paper dolls. My hand found the scissors almost by instinct. When Joseph advanced again, he held it up like a shield. I didn't mean to hurt, just defend myself. But in the violence of his attack, the blade penetrated his shoulder. He howled in pain and surprise, staggering back. Blood began to stain his white shirt, spreading like a red flower. For a moment he looked stunned, as if he couldn't believe I had actually defended myself. I took advantage of that moment to run. I left the room, crossed the hallway and the living room and burst out of the house into the rain that was now falling harder. I didn't look back to see if he was following me. I only thought about getting to Janine, about keeping her protected. I ran down Muddy Street to Dona Conseco's house, the lightning illuminating my path in ghostly flashes. When I reached her door, she was panting and shaking, her face swollen where Jose had struck me, her dress soaked and clinging to her body. Dona Conseco opened the door and let out an exclamation of horror when she saw me. "Holy God, Mary, what happened to you?" "Janine," was all I could say. "Is she here?" Yes. She just arrived, she's inside, scared." "Maria, for the love of God, tell me what's going on." I walked into the house, my legs barely supporting me. Janine was huddled in a corner of the room, hugging her doll. When he saw me, his eyes widened in horror. "Mommy, your face." I ran to her and hugged her tightly, not caring that my wet clothes soaked her too. I felt her small body trembling against mine and I promised myself that nothing and no one would hurt her again. Dona Conseco brought a towel and began to dry my wet hair, murmuring words of comfort. She was the one who suggested we call the police. "No, Conseco," he said, knowing all too well how things worked in our city. "The police here won't do anything to Jose. He has friends everywhere. So, what are you going to do, Maria? You can't go back to that house." I looked at Janine, who was watching me with eyes that had seen things no child should see. I took her little hand in mine and said, "Let's go, daughter. Let's start a new life far away from here." "Where to, Mommy?" she asked, her voice small and frightened. "To Sao Paulo," I replied, thinking of my cousin Lourdes, who had moved there years before. "It's a big city, where we can hide, where your father won't find us." It was Dona Conseco who helped us that night. She lent us dry clothes, gave us food and a place to sleep. And most importantly, she kept our secret when Jose showed up hours later, his shoulder bandaged, asking for us. Didn't I see them, Jose? She lied shamelessly. Maybe they went to Maria's sister's house, as she had planned. Meanwhile, hidden in the back room, Janine and I listened to her voice and I felt my daughter tremble at the familiar sound. I hugged her tighter, whispering words of comfort and promises of protection. That night, lying in the makeshift bed in Dona Conseco's house, with Janine finally sleeping next to me after hours of crying, I stared at the ceiling and thought about how much our lives had changed in a matter of hours. The whole world I knew, my marriage, my home, the security I thought I had crumbled. But paradoxically, I also felt stronger than ever. The next morning, before sunrise, Dona Conseco drove us to the bus station in her old blue Beetle. With the money she had lent us, her savings from years of working as a seamstress, we bought 2 tickets to Sao Paulo. While we waited for the bus, with only a small suitcase, containing the little that Dona Conseco had managed to take from our house without arousing suspicion, Janine asked me something that broke my heart. Mommy, was it my fault? What did Daddy do to me? Was it because I did something wrong? I knelt down to her level, held her little face in my hands and said with all the firmness I could muster. Never ever think that, Janine. You did nothing wrong. He was the one who did something terrible, something no father should do to his daughter. And now we are going to a place where he will never be able to hurt you again. The bus arrived loudly and with smoke coming out of the exhaust. We climbed the steps, found our seats, and when the engine roared and we began to drive away from the small town where I had spent my entire life, I felt a mixture of terror and liberation. Looking out the window, I saw familiar houses, the church where I got married, the square where I used to take Janine to play, all of which faded away, shrinking until they disappeared around the bend in the road. Janine fell asleep with her head in my lap, exhausted by the trauma and the emotions. I stroked her hair, watching her face finally relax in sleep. And I made a silent promise. From that day on, I would live only to protect her and to make sure she had the chance to be happy again. The bus chugged along the dirt road, bumping with every pothole, taking us toward an uncertain future. But for the first time in a long time, I felt hope. The truth had come out, the nightmare had been exposed to the light, and now we could begin to heal our wounds. I still didn't know what our life in Sao Paulo would be like, how I would support myself and my daughter in a big, unfamiliar city. But I knew with absolute certainty that whatever hardship we faced would be better than the life of fear and abuse we had left behind. As the sun began to rise over the horizon, tinging the sky pink and golden, I let a few tears flow silently. They were not only tears of sadness for what we had lost, but also of relief for what we had escaped and of determination for what we still had to build. We arrived in Sao Paulo on a sultry afternoon in July 1964. The Tite bus station was a whirlwind of people, noise, and smoke. So different from the peaceful city we had left behind. Janine held my hand tightly, her eyes wide open at this new world. In the pocket of my dress I kept my cousin Lord's address, hastily scribbled by Dona Conseco, and the few banknotes we had left after the trip. "It's so big, Mommy," whispered Janine, looking at the buildings rising in the distance. "Yes, it is, daughter, and that is why we will be able to hide here." Finding Lord's address was an odyssey. We took one crowded bus, then another, following the confusing instructions we were given by strangers. When we finally arrived at the Muca neighborhood, it was almost night. Lord's house was in a narrow alley between a textile factory and a bakery. The smell of fresh bread mixed with the odor of industrial smoke. Lord's hadn't seen me for 8 years, since she herself had fled our city to try her luck in the capital. When he opened the door and saw me there, with my face still marked by Jose's blows and a frightened child beside me, his astonishment was visible. "Maria, my God in heaven, what happened to you?" I couldn't answer. The words caught in my throat, and for the first time since our escape, I burst into tears. Lords pulled us inside, closed the door, and held me as I sobbed. Janine, confused and scared by my lack of control, started to cry too. That night, after Janine fell asleep on the makeshift mattress in the tiny living room of Lord's apartment, I told my cousin everything. The words came out with difficulty, interrupted by sobs and painful pauses. She listened silently to the horror growing in his eyes. "I always thought there was something wrong with Jose," she said finally. "I remember when you got married how he isolated you from your family, but this with his own daughter?" His voice broke. "I should have realized sooner," I muttered, guilt eating away at me. What kind of mother doesn't realize what her daughter is being? I couldn't complete the sentence. Lourdes held my hands firmly. Don't do this to yourself, Maria. You acted when you found out. Saved his daughter. That's what matters now. In the days that followed, we tried to adapt to the new reality. Lourdes worked in a button factory and managed to recommend me for a cleaning job there. The salary was miserable, but it was something. Janine stayed with her neighbor, Mrs. Zulmara, a woman from Bahia who looked after children to supplement her husband's retirement. Nights were the worst time. Janine had terrible nightmares. I woke up screaming, sweaty. I would hold her and sing her the lullabies of our childhood until she fell back asleep. Sometimes he would talk about what Joseph had done in confusing, painful fragments that tore at my soul. Other times he would ask when we would be returning home. That's not our house anymore, daughter, I replied. Our home is here now. But I myself did not believe these words. Lourdes' apartment, with its peeling walls and shared bathroom with 3 other families down the hall, was not a home, it was a temporary refuge, a hiding place. 3 weeks after our arrival, what I had feared so much happened. We were returning from the bakery on a Sunday morning. A little luxury we allowed ourselves once a week. A sweet bread for Jan and I. When I saw a familiar car parked on the corner, my heart sank. I knew that green Chevrolet. I knew who was behind the wheel. Janine, I whispered, pulling her behind a newspaper stand. Remember that game of hide and seek we used to play? We need to play now. Be quiet. But it was too late. Jose had already seen us. He got out of the car and came toward us. His face was transformed into a smile I knew well. That public smile of a respectable man. He was wearing his grey Sunday suit. There was a discreet bandage on his neck, where the scissors had cut him. Maria, he called, his voice falsely cordial. I finally found you. I was so worried. Janine clung to my skirt, trembling. The sobs remained silent in her throat, as she had learned to do so as not to anger her father. How did you find us? I asked, taking a step back. I have contacts, you know. When I found out you had come to Sao Paulo, it was only a matter of time. He moved closer, lowering his voice. You caused a scandal in the city, you know? Everyone is talking. The wife of the city accountant running away in the middle of the night with her daughter. What are you doing here, Jose? His smile faltered for a moment. I came to get you too. Of course. This has gone too far, Maria. This madness has to stop. We are not going back, I said. My voice was firmer than I expected. Never again. Jose looked around, aware of the people passing by who might hear us. His face took on that worried expression of a father and husband that he knew so well how to interpret. Let's talk in private, Maria, for Janine's sake. There is nothing for us to talk about. You know what you did and you know why we ran away. His face hardened. Be careful what you say, Maria. These are very serious accusations. Who will believe you? A woman who abandoned her home traumatized her own daughter with this crazy escape and even attacked me with a pair of scissors. He pointed discreetly to the bandage on her neck. I have witnesses who can testify to your erratic behavior in recent weeks. The town doctor is willing to attest that you suffer from hysteria. I felt my blood run cold in my veins. Jose had prepared the ground, created a narrative in which I was the unbalanced villain. He knew that small town too well. He knew how rumors spread, how people judged based on appearances. What do you want, Jose? I want my family back. And I am willing to forgive all of this confusion. We can start over. Everyone deserves a second chance, don't they? It was then that Janine, who until that moment had remained silent and cowering behind me, took a step forward. Her pale little face was contorted with a mixture of fear and anger. I don't want to go back, she said. Her voice was small but firm. I don't want you to come into my room again, Daddy. Jose's face changed. For a second I saw the same look of fury I had seen that fateful night. His hands clenched into fists and I thought he was going to attack us right there in the middle of the street. But then, as if remembering where we were, his face softened again. Look what you did, Maria. You put these horrible ideas in her head. You are poisoning our daughter against me. I don't need to put anything in her head, Jose. She knows what she has been through. What have you done to her? He took another step towards us. The pent-up anger made a vein throb in his temple. You can't stop me from seeing my daughter. I have rights. That's when I heard a familiar voice behind me. Is there a problem here? It was Roberto, Lord's husband, a tall, strong man who worked at the SIS in Porto. He had met us on the street by chance, returning from his night shift. Jose hesitated, assessing the man who was much larger than him. No problem. I'm just trying to talk to my wife and daughter. Roberto looked at me, then at Janine, clinging to my skirt, her eyes wide with fear, and back at Jose. It doesn't look like they want to talk to you. Jose took a step back, but his look told me that this wasn't over. I'm going back, Maria, and next time I'll bring the police with me. What do you think will happen when they find out that you attacked me with scissors and kidnapped our daughter? He turned his back and walked toward the car. Before getting in, he gave Jen and I one last look. A look that made me understand that he wouldn't give up easily. Roberto accompanied us to Lord's apartment, trying to reassure me, saying that Jose wouldn't dare come back. But I knew better. I knew my husband's determination, his ability to manipulate situations and people. And worse, I knew that he was right about one thing. Legally I had no way of stopping him from taking Jan and I. That night, after everyone was asleep, I sat at the table. I went to the kitchen with a piece of paper and a pencil. I began to write everything down, every detail of what I had discovered, every word Janine had told me, every strange behavior I had noticed. I wrote about the night I caught Jose in her room, about our escape, about his appearance in Sao Paulo. It was a testimony, a proof of what we had experienced. The next morning, I asked Roberto to take me to a police station. Not just any police station, but one far from our neighborhood, where Jose could not easily find us. On the way, I explained to Janine what we needed to do. We are going to have to tell some people what Daddy did to you, daughter. It will be difficult, but it is the only way to stop him from taking us back. Her eyes filled with tears. Will they believe us, Mom? I did not answer right away. The truth was that I did not know. In 1964, in Brazil, a woman's word was worth little, especially against a respected man like Jose. A child's word, then, was almost nothing. But we had to try. Let's do it with I hope you will believe me, I finally replied. The police station was a gray, intimidating building. Inside, uniformed men walked around with stern expressions. Janine squeezed my hand tighter. The smell of cigarettes permeated everything. The officer who attended to us, a middle-aged man with a thick mustache and deep circles under his eyes, listened to my story with an impenetrable expression. When I finished, he cleared his throat uncomfortably. Ma'am, these are very serious accusations. Do you have proof of what you are saying? I have my daughter's testimony. I have her nightmares, the fear in her eyes when her father approaches. I have the marks on my own body from when he attacked me when he was discovered. The delegate shook his head. It's not enough. We need concrete evidence to accuse a good man of what you are accusing him of. And what happens if he comes with the police in our city? He threatened to do so. He said he's going to charge me with kidnapping and attempted murder. The man sighed, rubbing his tired eyes. If he has a court order, there's not much we can do. The law is on his side. He is the father of the child. You legally have rights over it. We left the police station defeated. Janine didn't fully understand what had happened, but she could sense my despair. On the way back, we stopped at a small park. I sat down on a bench and pulled my daughter into my lap, hugging her as if I could protect her from the entire world with just my arms. What are we going to do now, Mommy? She asked, her voice small and scared. It was then that I made the hardest decision of my life. We'll have to go further, daughter, to a place where your father will never find us. That same afternoon, with the help of Lourdes and Roberto, we began to plan our final escape, not only from Jose, but from everything we knew. A complete new beginning, with new names, new story, new life. Roberto had a friend who worked doing documents, not all of them legal. For a price, he could provide us with new identities. Lourdes emptied her savings to help us. In 3 days I would no longer be Maria Oliveira, Jose's wife, but Marina Silva, a widow, moving to Porto Alegre with her daughter Joanna to be close to non-existent relatives. The day before we left, while I was packing the small suitcase with the little we had, I found Dianini sitting on the bed, looking at her doll Lily. Will we have to leave Lily behind, Mommy? She asked, her eyes sad. She has our real name embroidered on her. My heart sank. That rag doll made by my own hands was Janine's last link to her previous life, to the happy times before everything fell apart. No, daughter, I replied, sitting down beside her. Let's take Lily with us. I'm going to take the embroidery off and make a new one with our new names. Lily will change with us. That night, by the dim light of a candle to save electricity, I carefully wrote out the name Janine, embroidered on the doll's dress. As I worked, silent tears streamed down my face. It wasn't just my daughter's name that I was removing, but our entire history, our identity, everything we had been. When I was done, I looked at the little circle of loose thread where the name had been. Tomorrow Joanna would embroider in the same place. A new name for a new life. But tonight I left the space empty, the way I felt inside. At dawn, when everyone was asleep, I took the notebook where I had recorded everything that had happened and wrote one last entry. Today we are no longer who we were. I ask God for forgiveness for this necessary lie. I don't do this for myself, but for my daughter, so that she can grow up without fear, without nightmares, without looking over her shoulder. May one day she understand and forgive me for tearing her away from everything she knew. May one day I forgive myself for not having realized it sooner, for not having acted sooner. Maria Oliveira dies today. Marina Silva is born tomorrow. May God guide us on this new path. I closed the notebook and placed it at the bottom of the suitcase among the few pieces of clothing we would take. It was the only true record of who we were and what we had experienced. Maybe one day, when it was safe, we could revisit it. Or perhaps it would be better if it remained buried, like so many other painful memories. The next morning, we boarded the bus to Porto Alegre. Janine, now Joanna, pressed her face against the window, watching Sao Paulo disappear as we drove along the highway. Her now nameless Lily doll was clutched to her chest. Are we going somewhere good, Mom? She asked, her voice hesitant. Yes, daughter, I replied, stroking her hair. A place where we can be happy again. As the bus moved forward, taking us into the unknown, I thought about all that we were leaving behind. Not just Joseph and his cruelty, but also our hometown, our family, our friends, even our names. It was a high price to pay for safety. But looking at Janine, at her face that was slowly regaining its lost innocence, I knew it would be worth it. The road stretched out before us, endless and full of promise. We didn't know what awaited us, but we were certain of one thing. We were free. And this freedom, won with so much pain and sacrifice, was more precious than anything we had ever possessed. Facing the judgment of society in the 60s, Porto Alegre welcomed us with a fine drizzle and a grey sky in August 1964. The city was bigger and more imposing than I expected. With its old buildings and wide streets. We disembarked at the bus station at dusk. Two solitary figures amidst the hurried crowd. With the money lords had given us, we were able to pay for a modest guest house on a narrow street in the center. The room was small, with two single beds, a worn wardrobe and a window that looked out onto a dark inner courtyard. But it was ours and most importantly, it was far from Joseph. Our new life began the next day. With my fake documents, I got a job as a cleaner in a hospital. The salary was low, but it included one meal a day and the possibility of taking home donated clothes and shoes. For Janine, now Joanna, I found a public school a few blocks from our boarding house. On the first day of school, as I helped her dress in the simple uniform we had bought second-hand, she asked me, "What if someone asks about Daddy? You tell them he died when you were little. That you don't remember him." I replied, hating to teach my daughter to lie, but knowing it was necessary. "What if they ask where we come from? Tell them we come from a small town in the interior of Sao Paulo, that we moved here to be near relatives." Janine nodded, absorbing the lies she would have to tell. At just 8 years old, she already carried a weight that children should not carry. The weight of a terrible secret and a false identity. The first few weeks were the hardest. Every knock on the boarding house door made me freeze in fear. Every police car that passed by made me imagine that Jose had found us. At night, when Janine slept, I stayed awake, vigilant, ready to flee at the slightest sign of danger. But little by little, the fear began to lessen. We settled into a routine. I worked during the day, and I went to work. Day. Janine went to school. Oh, but school. At night, we did her homework together, by the dim light of the cracked lampshade. On Sundays, when I wasn't working, we went to the park or simply walked the streets, discovering our new city. It was on one of these Sunday walks that we met Dona Azira, an elderly lady who sold homemade sweets at a small stand near the square. She noticed Janine looking longingly at the brigadieros lined up in the window and offered her one as a gift. "For this beautiful girl," she said with a warm smile. "Girls need sweets every now and then." That simple gesture of kindness from a stranger made me cry right there in front of everyone. Dona Azira, confused but understanding, invited us to have coffee at her house, which was in the back of the small bakery. It became a Sunday ritual. After lunch, we would go visit Dona Azira. I would help her make sweets for the following week, while Jan and I played with the old lady's cat or drew. The kitchen table. Dona Azira never asked much about our past and I never offered any information. There was a silent understanding between us. She could see that we carried wounds that were still healing. It was Dona Azira who suggested that I could do more than clean hospital floors. "You have skillful hands, Marina," she said using my fake name, which was already starting to sound natural. "And she's smart. She could learn to make sweets from me. I'm getting old. I need help." So I began to divide my time between the hospital and the bakery. Little by little, I learned all of Dona Azira's secrets. The exact point of the caramel, the right amount of grated coconut in the quindam, the precise movement to roll the brigadieros. Janine would stay at school in the morning and in the afternoon she would go straight to the bakery, where she would do her homework in a corner of the kitchen. But not everything was sweet and happy times. The shadow of the past still followed us. Janine had frequent nightmares. She would wake up screaming in the middle of the night. I myself could not look at a man in a suit grey without feeling a shiver of fear. And there was the constant judgment of society, something we couldn't escape, even with new names and in a new city. A woman alone with a child, without a husband, was the target of suspicion and gossip. The mothers of Janine's classmates rarely invited her to play at their houses. The men in the neighborhood alternated between unwanted advances, assuming a woman without a man would be available, and looks of contempt. At school, Janine faced her own battles. Children can be cruel. And a girl without a father was an easy target for teasing. One day, she came home with her dress torn and her face streaked with tears. "They said I don't have a father because you're a woman of the night," she sobbed in my arms. I wiped her tears, my heart breaking for her. "You know that's not true, daughter, and you know why we really don't have your father with us. Some truths are too hard to tell. So why do we have to lie? Why can't we tell the truth? How can we explain to a child that the truth doesn't even exist? Always set us free? That sometimes, especially for women in the 1960s, the truth could be used against us? That telling her that we ran away because her father molested her could make her even more isolated, stigmatized, forever branded as a dirty girl? Why sometimes, daughter? The truth is a luxury we cannot afford." I finally answered. "Someday, when you are older, you will understand." Janine nodded, although I knew she did not fully understand how she could. Even for me, as an adult, it was difficult to accept the injustices of the world we lived in. A few months after our arrival in Porto Alegre, I received a scare that almost made me reconsider our situation. A woman from social services showed up at Janine's school asking questions about our family. The concerned principal called me in for a talk. "Miss Silva," she said, using my false name. "The social worker is investigating cases of children who may be in a vulnerable situation." She mentioned that her daughter sometimes comes to school in worn-out clothes and seems to have difficulty fitting in. My heart raced. An investigation could lead to the discovery of our true identity. It could, in the worst-case scenario, lead Jose to us. "We do the best we can," I replied, keeping calm. "I'm a widow, I work 2 jobs. If Joanna's clothes aren't new, it's because I can't buy better ones at the moment. But she is well cared for, well fed and much loved." The director, an older woman with kind eyes, seemed to understand most of what I was saying. "Of course, Mrs. Silva, I'm not questioning your care for Joanna. I just thought you should know about the social worker. She may want to visit you at home." That night was another sleepless one. I stared at the ceiling, imagining escape scenarios in case the social worker discovered our ruse. Could we go to another state, another country? How long would we have to keep running? But the social worker's visit turned out to be less threatening than I had feared. The woman, a middle-aged lady with a tired expression, spent only 20 minutes in our small house. She asked us some questions about our routine, observed the conditions of the place and seemed satisfied with what she saw. A modest but clean and organized home, with school books on the table and Janine's drawings stuck to the wall. "It looks like you're doing a good job, Senora Silva," she said as she left. "It's not easy raising a daughter alone in these times." Those words spoken without judgment were like a bomb. Someone had looked at our situation and seen not a suspicious, divorced woman, but a mother struggling to raise her daughter in the best way possible. Little by little, we found other people like that in Porto Alegre, people who looked beyond appearances and social judgments. Dona Azira, of course, Janine's teacher, who always praised her performance and creativity. The elderly doctor at the hospital where I worked, who offered me free medicine when Dianini caught pneumonia in the harsh winter of 1965. Small gestures of kindness that gradually created a new support network around us, replacing the family we had left behind. It wasn't enough to erase the past, to completely heal the wounds that Jose had left in us, but it was enough to give us hope, to make us believe that a better life was possible. In July 1965, 1 year after our arrival in Porto Alegre, Dona Azira surprised me with an unexpected proposal. "Marina, I'm thinking about retiring," she said as we prepared a batch of those jeans. "These old hands can't take it anymore. I would like you to take over the bakery." I was speechless, looking at her in shock. "But Mrs. Azira, I don't have the money to buy your business." She smiled, her wrinkled face lighting up. "Who said anything about buying? I'll give you the recipe, the location, the customers. You already know how to do everything. It only pays me a small percentage each month to supplement my retirement. When I die, everything will be yours." Tears came to my eyes. That offer was more than I could have ever hoped for. It was a chance for independence, to build something of our own, to give Janine a better life. "I don't know what to say, Mrs. Azira. That's very generous." "It's not generosity, Marina. It's common sense. You have talent and you work hard. And I like you and your girl. You are the family I never had." Family? The word echoed in my heart. We were a family, Janine and I, small, incomplete in the eyes of society, but united by a love that had survived the worst of horrors. And now, somehow, Mrs. Azira had become part of that family. That night, lying in bed next to Janine, I looked at her serene expression in sleep. For the first time in over a year, I allowed myself to feel true relief. We were no longer just running away, surviving. We were building something new. It wasn't the future I had imagined when I married Jose in that small church in our hometown. It wasn't the life I expected when Jan and I was born, but it was ours, conquered with tears, courage, and determination. Taking over Dona Azira's bakery transformed our lives. In the first few months, I worked tirelessly to maintain the quality that customers expected. While learning about suppliers, inventory, and accounting, I left my job at the hospital to dedicate myself full-time to the new business. Janine, now almost 10, has become my little helper. After school, she would come straight to the candy store, where her favorite task was to decorate the brigadeiros with colorful sprinkles. Clients adored her, always commenting on how polite and smart she was. Some Sundays, when we were alone in the kitchen, I would teach her new recipes, sharing with her the secrets that Dona Azira had shared with me. "One day this bakery will be your daughter," I said, observing the care with which she selected the ingredients. The smile that lit up her face in those moments was like a balm for all the wounds we still carried. In 1967, 3 years after our escape, we had already managed to move into our own small apartment, bought with the savings from the confectionery shop. It was simple, but it had 2 rooms. A luxury that allowed us, for the first time, to have our own spaces. We decorated together, painting the walls light yellow, sewing flowery curtains, transforming that anonymous space into our home. It was that same year that Janine, now Joanna, for everyone who knew her, began therapy. I found a discreet psychologist, recommended by the old doctor at the hospital, and explained the situation with half-truths. I said that my daughter had suffered trauma in her childhood, that we had left behind a situation of domestic violence. I didn't mention the specific abuses, nor our change of identity, but it was enough for the professional to understand the gravity of the situation. The weekly sessions gradually began to take effect. Janine's nightmares have lessened. Her behavior at school improved and she began to make friends more easily. Little by little she recovered the spontaneous joy that Jose had stolen from her. At home, we developed a ritual for dealing with the past. Once a month, usually on a Sunday evening, we would sit together and talk openly about our memories, our fears, our hopes. It was our way of not letting secrets consume us from the inside. We never said Joseph's name. We referred to him simply as he, but we didn't allow silence to erase what had happened. Do you think he's still looking for us, Mom? Janine asked one of those nights, when she was already 12 years old. I don't know, daughter. Maybe at first, but now, after so much time, I do not think so. The truth is, I still looked over my shoulder when I walked down the street. I still felt a tightness in my chest when I saw a man who reminded me of Jose. He still kept a small suitcase packed in the back of the closet with money, documents, and a few pieces of clothing, in case we needed to flee again. But I didn't tell her that. Janine needed to feel safe in order to fully heal. The years passed, the confectionery prospered. We have gained a reputation throughout Porto Alegre for our sweets. Janine grew up to be a beautiful and studious teenager. In 1972, when she turned 16, I proudly received the news that she had been accepted into the nursing technician course. She wanted to work at the same hospital where I had started our new life. Why nursing? I asked, curious about her choice. Because I want to help people who have suffered, Mother, like we have suffered. I want to be there to listen, to believe, to give a little comfort. I hugged my daughter, my eyes filled with tears, my heart overflowing with a pride that almost hurt. Out of all the pain and horror we had lived through, she had drawn compassion and strength, not bitterness, not hate. It was a miracle that I witnessed every day. In 1974, 10 years after our escape, we received a letter that would change everything again. It was from Dona Conseco, the neighbor who had helped us on that fateful night. Addressed to Dona Azira's bakery, the only clues she had as to our whereabouts. With trembling hands, he opened the yellowed envelope. Dear Maria, or whatever name you use now. I hope this letter finds you well. You and little Janine. For years I have thought of you, praying that you are safe and happy wherever you are. I am writing to tell you that Jose passed away 3 months ago. A massive heart attack was buried here in the city with all the honors that a respectable man like him deserved. No one here, except me, knows the truth about him, about what he did to his own daughter, about how you had to flee into the world. You continue to be the unbalanced wife who abandoned her home and kidnapped her daughter. Maybe it doesn't mean anything to you now, after all this time. Maybe you've built a new life so complete that the past no longer matters. But I thought you should know that you are free. With love, Conseco. I read the letter 3 times before I could fully absorb its meaning. Jose dead, the man who had destroyed our lives, who had forced us to abandon everything and everyone, who had turned my daughter into a frightened shadow of herself. Dead. I didn't feel joy, I didn't feel sadness. What I felt was a profound relief, as if a weight I had been carrying for so long that I no longer even noticed its existence had suddenly been lifted. I was able to breathe fully, perhaps for the first time in 10 years. When Janine came home from school, I showed her the letter. She read it silently, her face expressionless. When he finished, he looked up at me. It means we can go back, use our real names again. The question took me by surprise. In my mind, our old life was dead and buried, just as Joseph was now. Porto Alegre was our home. The confectionery is our livelihood, our new names, our reality. Do you want to come back? I asked carefully. She thought for a moment, then shook her head. No, there is nothing there for us. But she hesitated. Sometimes I'm afraid of forgetting who I really am, of forgetting that I was once Janine Oliveira. I understood what she meant. Our escape from Yar had been necessary, but it had come at a cost. We had left behind not only danger and pain, but also parts of our identity. You never stopped being Janine, he said softly. Just like me, I never stopped being Maria. They are just names on papers. What matters is who we are inside. I took out from the back of the closet the suitcase that I kept ready for a possible escape, the one that was never necessary. Inside it, among clothes and documents, was the old notebook where I had recorded our story. I handed it over to Janine. This is the record of who we were, where we came from, what happened. Keep it. Someday, when you're ready, you can read it. To remember, to understand, to forgive myself for all the difficult decisions I had to make. 3 years later, in 1977, Jan and I graduated from the nursing technical course. At the celebration, as we toasted with the cheap wine we could buy, she surprised me. Mom, I've made a decision. I want to study psychology at college. I want to specialize in childhood trauma, helping children who have been through what I went through. In that moment, I had a clear vision of the closing circle, of the terrified girl who had run away with me on a rainy night. Janine had grown into a strong woman, determined to turn her pain into healing for others. It was the purest form of victory over Joseph, over the evil he represented. In 1980, when Janine was a junior in college, we decided to take a trip. Not back to our hometown. This return was not necessary, but to Sao Paulo to visit Lourdes and Roberto, who had helped us in those desperate days after our escape. It was an emotional meeting. Lourdes cried when she saw Jan and I transformed into a young woman. Roberto, now with grey hair, told how he had made up stories to throw Jose off the scent when he came back looking for us. Sitting in the couple's simple living room, we shared memories, tears and, surprisingly, even a few laughs. "You saved our lives," he told them, holding out their wrinkled hands. "I will never forget this." "You saved yourself, Maria," replied Lourdes. "It was your courage that saved you both." On the way back to Porto Alegre, I looked at Janine, asleep on the bus next to me. His face, illuminated by the occasional headlights of cars passing in the opposite direction, looked peaceful. I thought about everything we had been through, all the decisions, the fears, the struggles. Was it worth it? The answer was there, in my daughter's peaceful sleep, in the strong, compassionate woman she had become. In 1985, 21 years after that fateful night when I discovered Jose's terrible secret, I sat in the front row of the university auditorium to watch the defense of Janine's master's thesis, or rather, the dizzy Joanna Silva, as she was known professionally. The theme of trauma and resilience, therapeutic strategies for child victims of abuse. In the audience was Mrs. Azira, now over 80 years old, but still lucid and proud. Janine's boyfriend, a young doctor she met at the hospital. And I, the woman who had once been Maria Oliveira, Jose's wife, and who was now known to everyone as Marina Silva, owner of the most beloved bakery in the neighborhood. When Janine took the stage to begin her performance, our eyes met. She smiled. A smile that carried everything. Recognition of the past, acceptance of the present, hope for the future. At that moment, I knew, we won. On the last page of his work, dedicated to me, there was a sentence that summed up our journey. To my mother, who taught me that the greatest strength lies in surviving and the greatest courage lies in starting over. Today, at 86 years old, I look back and see how a decision made in a moment of desperation ended up saving not only my daughter's life, but my own as well. Jose stole a lot from us, our security, our identity, years of peace, but he could not steal our ability to love, to trust, to rebuild. Janine, who now alternates between using her real name at home and her professional name, Joanna, at work, runs a support center for women and children who are victims of violence. I have 2 wonderful children who call me grandma and don't know the whole story of our past. It's just that your grandmother was very brave one day. The Lily doll, now worn by time and the love of 3 generations, rests on a shelf in my granddaughter's room. The dress, which has been patched so many times, still bears the embroidery I did that night in Sao Paulo. Joanna, but if you look closely you can see the marks of where another name was before. Some scars never go away completely. They are there to remind us not only of the pain, but also of the healing. Not just what we lost, but what we found along the way. And that, more than anything else. That's what I want you to take away from this story. No matter how dark the night, how impossible the situation seems. There is always a way, there is always hope, there is always the possibility of transforming the worst pain into the greatest strength. I know, I've lived it. If you were moved by my life story, subscribe to the channel, activate the bell and like the video. This helps me a lot. See you later, my dears. 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 See you later, my dears.